Welcome back to Boom Buster. This is an action-packed puzzle platformer that I talked about just over 2 months ago. Well, I'm back again to talk about the brand new Kickstarter demo. Before we jump into what's new, I've got 2 things to say. First of all, a huge thank you to the folks over at TALLGLASS for sending me the demo early. It's an incredible honor to be able to play the new demo and make a video about it in time for the Kickstarter's launch. And secondly, Boom Buster's got a Kickstarter now. If you want to play the demo and help make this fantastic game a reality, click the link at the top of the description and show your support. You'd be helping some awesome developers make an awesome game. Alright, let's get into the demo. If you're unfamiliar with Boom Buster's gameplay loop, it's real simple. I'm not going to go incredibly in depth on it since I've talked about this game before, but in summary, colored bombs will drop in from the top of the screen, and it's your job to deposit them in their respective containers. You automatically pick up bombs by walking into them, and you drop them by spinning. Enemies will spawn in from time to time and can be killed by either jumping on them or spinning into them. With that covered, there's a long list of changes and additions to go over. The first change you'll notice, aside from the changes to the menu and the UI, is that the height of Buster's double jump has been reduced. This is to facilitate the use of the backflip, which went underutilized in past demos because the double jump went up so high. I actually really like this change as it forces you to become more comfortable with all parts of Buster's moveset instead of just relying on his double jump. The other major moveset change is the addition of the slide. By pressing your dash button while on the ground, Buster will slide forwards to slip underneath gaps quickly. Fortunately, this gets used pretty frequently in stages and is fun to just spam while waiting for the next bomb. Other than that, Buster is the same rambunctious dude he's always been. Getting into the main stages, there are 15 stages to go through with 3 acts each, for a total of 15 different maps aside from the mini-boss stage. Basically, none of the acts are reused from the past 2 demos. I'm certain that while some ideas have been borrowed, every previous act has been reworked to fit how the game works currently. The first stage is still focused on getting you used to the gameplay, and as such there's not much for me to talk about here. The acts have been redesigned to encourage and incorporate use of the backflip and slide, which is a welcome change. Here we can find a brand new mechanic, food. Each stage, excluding the mini-boss, includes 1 food item in each act, for 3 total. After a certain amount of time has passed, the act's food item will spawn in and you'll have just a few seconds to collect it before it disappears. The food acts a lot like star coins from the new Super Mario Bros. Games, so while they may have a function in the full game, currently they're just for completionists. Just like last time, Stage 1 is a good introduction to the game's main loop. I do think it is a little harder than in the previous demo, though that is likely because of the new focus on backflips and slides. Things are going to keep getting harder as we move on to Stage 2, which still isn't too tough. Stage 2 introduces 2 mechanics, cloud platforms and falling platforms. These were both in the previous demos, but they see slightly more use here. The cloud platforms only appear in the first act, where it functions as a way to quickly get from the ground to the raised platforms. The falling platforms are used in acts 2 and 3, and it functions exactly how you'd expect. Touch it and it will fall shortly after. This time, however, bombs and enemies do not make the platforms fall, only Buster does. Stage 2 is where the game starts to bare its teeth, especially in Act 3. Things can get pretty intense as the stage slowly fills with enemies and bombs. There's 1 high up platform that can only be reached with the 2 moving platforms, so any bombs that land up there should be prioritized first. However, I like the difficulty. I said this in my review of the game's Christmas demo, but I think this game is at its best when it is difficult and chaotic, so I'm happy to see this new demo become difficult so soon. Stage 3 introduces a few new mechanics and a new enemy. First, you're introduced to switches and switch blocks. Switches can be set to on or off, and the switch blocks will activate or deactivate accordingly. Orange blocks will be active when the switch is on and inactive when the switch is off, with the teal blocks being the opposite. The switches aren't just used to block off one half of the map. The second and third acts have small corners covered by blocks, and since bombs drop into the spots very frequently, you're going to be using the switches frequently. I definitely prefer the switch mechanic being introduced with something simple like blocks. In the last demo it was used with a different mechanic, specifically jelly, and I think that restricted the gimmick's creativity. Since the jellies never moved, the only things you could do were to put the switch further away from the jellies or swap the positions of the jellies. But with the blocks, you can be much more creative by blocking off entire halves of the map or just small portions. And since each act has a set pattern of bombs and enemy spawns, you can memorize what state the switch needs to be in at a specific time. The new enemy you face is Roger, a walking puck of spikes. He can only be killed by stomping on his head, which has a conveniently placed bandage to indicate his weakness. Aside from the switches and Roger, the last two things introduced in Stage 3 are springs and one-way doors. Springs are only used in Act 1 of Stage 3 and function exactly how you'd expect. They launch you upwards. I expected them to be used more often, but they really just appear in this act, they aren't used anywhere else. One-way doors also function how you'd expect, they let you pass through one way and block you from going the other way. These are used to make it tougher to access a certain part of the map. Stage 3 is another step up in difficulty, specifically thanks to the switches and switch blocks, but it's still a ton of fun. I think the switch mechanic will leave a better first impression on new players since it is introduced with a simpler effect like the blocks. Now let's move on to Stage 4, which introduces one new gimmick and one new enemy. Jelly is the main gimmick of Stage 4. When a bomb is dropped on a jelly, it will bounce back onto the map. There are three variants of jellies in Stage 4. Act 1 has a single jelly sliding back and forth between the containers, Act 2 has a line of constantly moving jellies, and Act 3 combines jellies with the switches just like in the last demo. One thing that I really like about the jelly is that, when it's not connected to a switch, it requires you to have good timing to drop the bombs in their containers. While a mechanic that makes you wait in a game all about dropping bombs before they explode sounds like a bad idea, I actually really like how stressful they make the game. The bombs fortunately take a while to explode, so there may be some close calls, but it's unlikely having to wait will ruin your attempt. The new enemy is this purple snake. It will stand still for a moment before jumping forwards a short distance. It's not too difficult to deal with, but I'm glad there's an enemy that doesn't just walk towards you. This stage was also the first time I used the power-up mechanic. In the bottom right of the screen there's a nuclear meter that builds up when you drop 2 or more bombs into a container. When it's filled, you can press whatever your charm button is to activate nuclear mode. In nuclear mode, Buster is colored green and completely invincible, killing enemies on contact. It's very useful in a pinch, but if you're good at stacking bombs, it might just be better to use it the moment you get it so you can start building up the meter again. Stage 4 feels like it tones down the chaos of the past few stages as sort of a breather, allowing you to regain your bearings before Stage 5. The acts are all very simple layouts with an easy to understand gimmick. But now, it's time for the toughest stage so far. Stage 5 is where things really start to get difficult. There are 3 major mechanics introduced in this stage: cannons, flying bombs, and purple bombs. Firstly, cannons are very similar to the barrel cannons from Donkey Kong Country. You hop in them and can launch out of them at any time. These are used to reach tall platforms or to collect flying bombs, because bombs can have wings now. Flying bombs will descend from the top of the screen and hover in one spot until collected. Lastly, there's a third color of bomb you get to deal with, these being purple bombs. These 3 additions alone make Stage 3 much tougher than the past stages, but we're not done yet. In Act 2, we're introduced to the barrier platforms. These function like regular platforms, but you cannot drop bombs through them. You have to go around them to drop your bombs. Lastly, in Act 3, we meet rails and fuzzies. Rails are small trails of dots that cannons and fuzzies follow, making them move along a set path. Flying bombs can also drop onto these rails and move along with them. And finally, fuzzies are what you'd think. They look like the fuzzies from Mario, and they behave like them too. Stage 5 is very tough, but still very fun. You're not dealing with a swarm of enemies, it's just you, the bombs, and the stage's gimmicks. The addition of a third bomb is probably the main thing making this stage so much harder. I do hope in future stages we get different combinations of bombs to sort, instead of the usual orange, teal, and purple. We're not done with this demo yet, however. There's one more stage to play, specifically a mini-boss. It's time to show the wizard who's boss. If you're unfamiliar with the story of Boom Buster, the wizard is the main antagonist, and he's stolen Buster and Bridget's bombs to stop the loud explosions. This mini-boss stage functions as an expanded version of the wizard's fight from the Xmas demo. You'll be sorting bombs across 3 acts, and once all bombs in an act have been collected, they'll shoot off into the sky to damage the wizard. Finish all 3 acts, and you'll win. However, the wizard isn't going to make it easy for you. The wizard will cast a wide variety of magical spells to either damage you or make it harder to sort all the bombs. He'll summon fireballs, rain down bolts of lightning, spawn a small horde of minions, and turn off the lights to reduce visibility. He'll be using these spells more and more as the fight goes on, up until the very end when he gets pissed and uses spell after spell after spell. This fight is super fun. The added challenge of dealing with the wizard's attacks turns what would be a showcase of the world's gimmicks into a hectic struggle to win. I'm excited to see what else they do with these mini-bosses, and if the mini-bosses are this fun, just imagine what the actual bosses would be like.
I hate you. Your nose is big and you're orange.
Now that we've defeated the wizard, we're done with Boom Buster's Kickstarter demo. As a reward, we can now select a new palette for Buster to wear. My personal favorite is purple, of course. This demo is fantastic. It was a blast to get through and it made me so much more excited for the full game, as if I wasn't already excited. However, one thing I did notice throughout the game was how many gimmicks, objects, and mechanics are used only a couple times and never used again. I imagine the intention is for every stage to have a set of new objects and mechanics to interact with, so as to keep things exciting and fresh, but a lot of those objects and mechanics either felt redundant or entirely underutilized. Take the springs for instance. Really, I should say spring because there's only one spring used throughout the entire demo, in Stage 3 Act 1, and they could easily be replaced by a few platforms. Similar thing with the one-way doors, which are only used in a couple acts. Now, there's only 6 stages in this demo, so it's not like I can accurately judge how these mechanics are used in the full game, but I think it's something TALLGLASS should keep in mind when making the rest of the stages. It'd be a shame if there were a ton of small mechanics that are only used every now and then, so future stages should use things like the springs and one-way doors more often, or else those mechanics will feel underutilized. Again, huge thank you to TALLGLASS for sending me the demo early. I'm so grateful I was allowed to play it early and make a video on it. I implore everyone to check out the game's Kickstarter and throw some cash at this amazing project. It'd be such a shame for a game this good to never see the light of day again. And give this demo a try too. The whole reason it exists is to convince people to support the game. So play it, have fun with it. I know I did. That will be all from me. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!